That cold morning, no one expected a confession to change everything. What started as a simple question became a story the whole family tried to explain, and few had the courage to tell. Before we begin, subscribe and turn on the bell. Here we share the confessions people only dare to say in front of God, and the quiet choices that save a soul. I remember the exact moment the key turned in the lock behind me, the metallic click echoing like a final judgment in the empty hallway. It was a Tuesday evening in late autumn, the kind where the wind rattles the bare branches outside and the streetlights cast long, accusing shadows on the pavement. My suitcase, that old, battered one from my husband's funeral years ago, sat heavy at my feet, its wheels scarred from too many moves I never asked for. I was 72, with hands that still trembled from the arthritis. And there I stood in front of the Midland Inn, a budget place off the highway where truckers stopped and families on tight budgets squeezed into rooms that smelled of stale coffee and regret. "Go on, Mum," my son David had said just hours earlier. His voice clipped over the phone as if he were discussing the weather. "It's only for a few nights. Sarah's parents are flying in from Chicago and they need the guest room. You understand, right? Family first. Family first." The words hung in the air between us even now, as I fumbled for the reservation slip he'd texted me. Yes, texted, like I was some distant acquaintance. Not the woman who'd raised him alone after his father died in that factory accident. The front desk clerk, a young woman with tired eyes and a name tag reading Maria, looked at me with that pitying glance people reserve for the forgotten. "Mrs. Harlan, your son booked the Standard Queen. It's $89 a night, prepaid." I nodded, my throat tight, and followed her to the elevator. The doors slid shut with a groan, and in that confined space, the weight of it all pressed down, the suitcase, the years, the quiet betrayal that had been building like frost on a windowpane. David's house, that two-story colonial I'd helped pay for with my widow's pension and odd jobs cleaning houses in the neighborhood, was just 10 miles away. But tonight, it might as well have been on the other side of the world. As the elevator hummed upward, I caught my reflection in the smudged mirror, grey hair pulled back in a sensible bun, wrinkles etched deep from nights spent worrying about him, and eyes that had once sparkled with pride, now dulled by this fresh humiliation. The room was on the 3rd floor, number 312, with a view of the parking lot where semis idled like sleeping beasts. I pushed open the door, the hinges creaking in protest, and stepped into the dimness. The bedspread was a faded floral pattern, the kind that hid stains, and the air carried a faint mustiness from the carpet. I set the suitcase down by the dresser, its faux wood surface scarred from countless guests who'd come and gone without a trace. Outside, rain began to patter against the window, soft at first, then insistent, as if the sky itself were weeping for what I'd become, an inconvenience shuffled aside for comfort's sake. I sank onto the edge of the bed, the mattress dipping under my slight frame, and pulled out my phone. David's text blinked up at me. "Made it to the hotel. Dad and Mom-in-law are here. Dinner's on. Wish you could join, but space is tight. Love you. Love you." It felt like a signature at the bottom of a contract, obligatory and cold. I thought of the house I'd shared with him for the last 5 years, ever since my little apartment's rent spiked and he insisted I move in. "Your family, Mom," he'd said then, wrapping me in a hug that now seemed like a trap. I'd cooked his meals, mended his clothes, even watched his toddler twins when Sarah's job took her away. My Social Security check went straight into their account each month, a contribution to the household, as he called it. And for what? To be exiled to this room with its thin walls, where I could hear the murmur of voices from the couple next door, arguing over something trivial. The pastor's office was where it all unraveled, though. That came later, after the in-laws had gone and the silence in the house grew thicker than fog. But even now, in that hotel room, I could feel the thread pulling taut, the one that would lead me to Father Elias's door. to the worn leather chair across from his desk, and the words I'd never thought I'd say aloud. "He sent me away," I'd tell him, my voice barely above a whisper, like I was luggage to be stored. The rain tapped harder, blurring the neon sign of the motel across the way, and I lay back on the bed, staring at the water-stained ceiling. How had it come to this? David, my only child, the boy I'd sacrificed everything for, now treating me like an afterthought so his wife's parents could have the comfort of fresh sheets and home-cooked meals. I closed my eyes, the hum of the air conditioner the only companion in the room, and let the memories flood in unbidden. It started small, didn't it? The offhand comments about my old-fashioned ways, the way Sarah would sigh when I offered to help in the kitchen, as if my presence cluttered their perfect life. But this was the line crossed, the moment when endurance cracked under the weight of neglect. I didn't cry then. Tears would come later, in the confessional light of the church. Instead, I just lay there, the phone silent in my hand, wondering if this was what loyalty earned you in the end, a keycard and a bill for your own displacement. The clock on the nightstand glowed 9:47 p.m., its red digits mocking the emptiness. Down the hall, a door slammed, followed by laughter, easy, unburdened laughter that twisted like a knife. David's in-laws, probably unpacking in my guest room, toasting to the visit while I huddled here, invisible. I thought of calling him, demanding to know why, but the words stuck. What good would they do? He was the provider now, or so he liked to remind me, the one with the steady job at the bank, the one who'd rescued me from independence. But rescue? This felt more like surrender, my dignity traded for a roof that could be revoked at whim. As the rain drummed on, I rose and unpacked the few things I'd brought. A nightgown, my Bible, a framed photo of David as a boy, grinning toothless in my arms. I placed it on the dresser, facing away from the bed, not ready to see that innocence lost. The humiliation burned quiet in my chest, a slow ember that would ignite questions I couldn't ignore. Why me? Why now? And in the depths of that night, alone with the storm, I whispered a prayer, not for revenge, but for clarity, for the strength to see the truth behind the family-first facade. Little did I know that whisper would echo all the way to the pastor's ear, unraveling a story none of us saw coming. The years leading up to that hotel keycard felt like a gradual fading, the kind where the light dims so slowly you don't notice until you're in the dark. It began innocently enough, back when David was still climbing the ladder at the bank, his suits pressed sharp and his ambitions sharper still. Sarah had just joined the family then, a bright-eyed accountant with a laugh that filled rooms and plans that always seemed one step ahead. They bought the Colonial in a quiet suburb, the one with the wraparound porch and the backyard big enough for the twins they dreamed of. I remember the closing day, the realtor handing over the keys with a flourish, and David turning to me with that boyish grin. "Mom, this is it, our future. Yours too, if you want it." I did want it, or at least I told myself I did. My apartment, a cramped one-bedroom in the old part of town, had become a burden after the rent hikes. The stairs were murder on my knees, and the isolation gnawed at me after my husband's death. David had lost his father young. I couldn't bear the thought of him carrying that weight alone, so when he suggested I sell the place and move into their guest room, it felt like a lifeline. "We'll take care of you," he promised, helping me pack the boxes of faded photos and chipped china. Family sticks together. I contributed what I could, my social security checks, wired monthly into their joint account, and my time. Endless hours folding laundry or stirring pots on the stove. It was my way of earning my keep, or so I reasoned, ignoring the quiet voice that whispered this was more than help. It was a tether, At first, the house buzzed with life. Sarah's pregnancy brought a glow to everything. The nursery painted soft blue, the crib assembled in the spare room that became mine only after the babies arrived. The twins, little Emma and Jack, came into the world screaming with promise, and I was there from the start, rocking them through colicky nights while Sarah recovered and David logged overtime. My hands, rough from years of factory work and widowhood, soothed their cries, and in those moments I felt needed, woven into the fabric of their days. David would come home exhausted, clap me on the shoulder and say, "Couldn't do it without you, Mom." Sarah, too, would smile over coffee, her fatigue lines softening as I handed her a fresh mug. "You're a godsend," she'd murmur, and I'd nod, content in the rhythm we'd found. But rhythms shift, don't they? Subtly at first, like sand slipping underfoot. The guest room, once a temporary haven, became permanent without a word. My things migrated from boxes to shelves, but so did the expectations. "Mum, could you watch the kids this afternoon? Sarah has a meeting. The check came in. Mind depositing it for us?" It was small, these requests, layered one atop the other, until they formed a wall I couldn't see over. I stopped cleaning houses for neighbors. The drive was too much, and besides, David said my place was here now. My pension, modest as it was, covered groceries, utilities, the essentials, he called them, his tone practical, like tallying columns at the bank. I didn't question it. After all, I'd raised him to be responsible, to provide. But providing, I learned, came with strings. The erosion crept in during the quiet hours, when the house settled and the twins' toys littered the floor like unspoken accusations. Sarah's sighs grew longer, her glances at my sensible sweaters and sensible shoes carrying a hint of judgment. "Mom, you could update your style a bit," she'd say lightly, folding my laundry with precise creases that weren't mine. David, ever the peacemaker, would chuckle it off, but his eyes lingered on the bank statements, on the mortgage payments that my contributions eased. Family gatherings amplified it. Thanksgivings, where aunts and uncles nodded approvingly at David's success, then turned to me with pitying smiles. "Still with them? Bless your heart." They saw the dependency, the way I'd traded autonomy for proximity, but no one named it. To them, I was the devoted mother, the widow who'd lucked into a second chance. If only they knew the cost. One evening stands out, etched like frost on glass. It was a year into my stay, the twins toddling now, and David came home late, his tie loosened, frustration etched on his face. "Rough day at work," he muttered, sinking into the kitchen chair. I'd made pot roast, the aroma filling the air, but Sarah was upstairs, on a call with her office. I served him silently, watching as he scrolled his phone, barely tasting the food. "Mom," he said finally, without looking up, "that check you deposited, did you see the balance? We're cutting it close this month." I paused, fork midway to my mouth. "I can pick up some shifts again," I offered, thinking of the neighbors who still asked after me. He waved it away. "No need, just keep contributing what you can. It's for the family." That word, family, became a shield, hiding the imbalance. I mended more than clothes. I mended the gaps in their life, the childcare that let Sarah advance, the financial cushion that let David chase promotions. In return, my world shrank to the four walls of that house, my outings limited to the grocery store or church on Sundays. Friends drifted. Calls went unanswered as I prioritized their needs. The arthritis in my hands worsened from scrubbing floors they could afford to have done, but complaints died on my lips. "Don't want to be a burden," I'd tell myself in the mirror, seeing the lines deepen, the spark fade. Father Elias would later ask, in that dim office with its scent of polished wood and old books, "When did you first feel the weight, Mrs. Harlan? Not the physical one, but the other." I'd hesitate, tracing the arm of the chair, and admit it was in those incremental surrenders. The way David's suggestions became mandates, Sarah's politeness a veil over resentment. The dependency wasn't just mine. It bound us all, but I bore the strain alone, my dignity eroding like the foundation of that grand house, cracked but unseen. The in-laws' visit was merely the fault line, the quake that revealed what had been building beneath. A mother valued not for her love, but for her utility, her quiet endurance propping up a life that no longer included her as equal. As I lay in that hotel bed nights later, replaying it all, the rain's rhythm matched the pulse of regret. How had I let it come to this? The boy who'd once clung to my skirts now orchestrated my exile, his wife's comfort paramount. The pastor's calm gaze would steady me then, his question simple: "What did you give up piece by piece?" But in the reconstruction of those years, the answer was clear. I'd given everything, and received only the illusion of belonging. The days blurred after the in-laws departed, their suitcases wheeled out to the airport shuttle with hugs and promises of reciprocity that rang hollow in the empty house. David drove them himself, his SUV gleaming under the morning sun, while I lingered in the hotel lobby, nursing a cup of weak coffee from the complimentary pot. The clerk, Maria, had extended my stay without question, her sympathy unspoken but evident in the way she slid an extra keycard across the counter. "Family visits can be tricky," she said softly, her accent laced with the weariness of someone who'd heard too many tales. I nodded, avoiding her eyes, and retreated to room 312, where the rain had given way to a brittle clarity that exposed every crack in the facade. Back home, though it felt less like home with each passing hour, I unpacked in silence, the guest room smelling faintly of the potpourri Sarah favored, a cloying lavender that masked nothing. David arrived that evening, arms laden with takeout from the Italian place downtown, his smile wide, as if the past week had been a minor detour. "Mom, you're back. Traffic was a nightmare, but the folks loved the house, said it felt just like theirs." He set the bags on the kitchen island, the same one I'd scrubbed spotless before my exile, and pulled out plates with the ease of routine. Sarah followed, her hair tousled from the drive, carrying the twins' bedtime stories under one arm. "We missed you," she said, though her eyes flicked to the clock, already calculating the evening's unwind. I wanted to confront it then, to let the words spill out like the steam from the pasta. Why me? Why the hotel with its thin pillows and echoing halls? But the moment slipped away in the clatter of forks and the twins' chatter. Instead, I served seconds, my hands steady despite the ache, and listened as they recounted the visit. The in-laws' praise for the garden I'd weeded, the dinners I'd planned from afar via text. "You'd have loved it, Mom," David said, reaching across to pat my hand. "But space, you know, they needed the quiet." Quiet. The word landed like a stone in still water, rippling through the unspoken. Word spread, as it does in families bound by blood and obligation. My sister Ellen called first, her voice crackling over the landline from her apartment across town. "David mentioned you stayed at a hotel for the in-laws?" "Oh, honey, that's just him being thoughtful. They're older, set in their ways, probably needed the extra space to rest." She laughed lightly, the sound tinny through the receiver as if it were a joke we shared. "You're not upset, are you? Don't be dramatic. It's not like he kicked you out." Dramatic. The label stung, wrapping around the truth like fog, obscuring the chill of that first night alone. Ellen had always been the practical one, the sister who'd remarried comfortably and viewed my widowhood as a phase best endured with grace. To her, my discomfort was exaggeration, a widow's sensitivity amplified by solitude. The community echoed her soon enough. At church that Sunday, the pews worn smooth from decades of confessions unspoken, Mrs. Hargrove from the Altar Guild cornered me after the service. Her Bible tucked under her arm, she leaned in with that conspiratorial whisper reserved for prayer chains and potlucks. "Heard about your little hotel adventure, Margaret. David's doing so well, such a good provider. But you, staying away? Sounds like you're too sensitive these days. Old age makes us forget how families stretch." Her eyes twinkled with what she thought was wisdom, but it felt like judgment, the kind that polishes neglect into virtue. The congregation nodded along over coffee in the fellowship hall, their murmurs blending with the aroma of doughnuts. Margaret's always been the worrier, ungrateful after all he's done, confused maybe. Seniors get that way. Even the neighbors, those quiet sentinels across the fence, misread the map of my life. Mr. Patel from next door waved me over one afternoon as I hung laundry in the yard, the sheets snapping in the breeze like flags of surrender. "Your son is generous, Mrs. Harlan. Sending you to a nice hotel. My daughter would never, but Americans, they value comfort." He chuckled, pruning his roses with precise snips, oblivious to the thorns. To him, I was the lucky one. The mother-in-law spared the chaos of guests, not the woman displaced for another's ease. The block's gossip mill turned it into folklore, the devoted widow who'd overreacted, her complaints dismissed as the ramblings of someone clinging to relevance. "She's old and confused," they'd say at the corner store, bagging my groceries with sympathetic shakes of the head. "David's patient with her, takes after his father." Father Elias noticed it first, in the way heads turned when I entered the chapel midweek, my steps measured against the stone floor. He'd invited me for tea after my call, his office a sanctuary of muted greens and leather-bound volumes, the single lamp casting pools of light on the desk. "People see what they want, Mrs. Harlan," he said quietly, stirring his cup with a silver spoon that clinked softly. "They call you ungrateful because it fits their story, the successful son, the burdensome elder. But truth isn't in their judgments, it's in your endurance." His words were a lantern in the dimness, not illuminating everything, but enough to question the shadows. I sat there, the steam rising between us, and felt the weight of those misreadings. Not just slights, but erasures, painting me as the villain in my own quiet tale. The isolation deepened in those weeks, a fog that settled over conversations and glances. David's co-workers, invited for a backyard barbecue, clapped him on the back and eyed me with polite detachment. "Your mum's a trooper," one said, sipping his beer. "Staying out of the way like that. Smart move." Trooper, as if my compliance were a medal, not a scar. Sarah's family, too, chimed in via group texts I was looped into reluctantly, photos of their visit, captions praising the hospitality, with a side note, "Sorry you missed it, Margaret. Hope the hotel was comfy." Comfy! The word mocked the lumpy bed, the vending machine dinners, the hours staring at the ceiling while laughter echoed from 10 miles away. In the end, it was the cumulative dismissal that hollowed me out, turning silent endurance into a question mark. Family, friends, strangers, they all rewrote the script, casting me as dramatic, crazy, too sensitive, old and confused, ungrateful for the scraps of inclusion. But in Father Elias's office, with the clock ticking steadily on the mantel, I began to see it for what it was, not my failing, but theirs. A refusal to look beyond the surface of comfort to the cost beneath. The pastor leaned forward, his voice steady as the rain that had returned outside. "Who are you, beyond their eyes?" And in that question, the misreadings cracked, revealing the woman I'd almost forgotten. Comment where you're watching from. I want to know how far these stories of courage and loyalty can travel. The steam from the tea had long dissipated, leaving the air in Father Elias's office thick with the scent of chamomile and aged paper. I sat across from him, my hands folded in my lap, fingers tracing the frayed edge of my sweater as if it held the map to what I'd lost. The room was small, its walls lined with bookshelves that bowed slightly under the weight of volumes on grace and forgiveness, and a single window overlooked the churchyard, where leaves skittered across the grass like forgotten prayers. Father Elias leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking softly, his eyes steady behind wire-rimmed glasses that caught the lamplight. He wasn't the type to rush. His silences were invitations, not judgments, drawing out truths that hid in the corners of the soul. "Mrs. Harlan," he said at last, his voice low and measured like the toll of a distant bell, "tell me about the hotel again. Not the room, but how it felt to turn that key." I hesitated, the memory surfacing sharp as a splinter, the click of the lock, the way my shadow stretched long on the worn carpet alone. "It felt like being erased," I whispered, my throat tightening. "Like all those years of giving, my checks, my time, my place in their home, meant nothing when it came to comfort for others." He nodded, not interrupting, letting the words settle between us. Outside, a car passed on the wet street, its tires hissing against the pavement, a reminder of the world moving on while I unraveled. He set his cup down, the porcelain clinking against the saucer with deliberate care. "That's the heart of it, isn't it? The giving without reciprocity. David calls it family. But what you're describing sounds like a ledger, your contributions tallied against their convenience." His words named it plainly, without accusation, stripping away the veil I'd draped over the neglect. Manipulation, he didn't say outright, but I heard it in the quiet emphasis on the imbalance, the way one side poured out while the other received and rationed. I'd always seen it as duty, the quiet endurance of a mother who'd buried her husband and rebuilt alone. But here, in this room with its faint echo of hymns from the sanctuary, it took shape. My son, unwittingly or not, had woven a web of dependency that ensnared us both. His authority built on my surrender. Father Elias steepled his fingers, his gaze never wavering. "Dignity isn't something you earn by enduring humiliation, Margaret. It's inherent, a gift from the one who sees you fully, even when your family looks away." He paused, letting the truth breathe, and I felt a warmth spread in my chest, not fiery but steady, like sunlight filtering through clouds. "You've carried this burden alone for too long, propping up their life while yours fades. That's not love. It's exploitation masked as obligation." The word exploitation hung there, heavy yet clarifying, reframing the hotel stay not as a minor inconvenience, but as a symptom of deeper disregard. My pension, wired faithfully each month. The hours spent with the twins so Sarah could climb her career ladder. The mending and cleaning that kept their home pristine. All of it, he implied, had become currency for my place at the table, revocable at their whim. I shifted in the chair, the wooden armrest cool against my palm, and met his eyes. But what do I do? Confront him? Demand my room back? My voice cracked. The fear of fracturing what little bond remained surfacing like bile. He shook his head gently, his expression one of calm resolve. "Boundaries, Margaret. Not walls to punish, but lines to protect your worth. Start small. Speak your truth to David, not in anger, but in clarity. This hurt me, you might say. I need to feel valued, not disposable. Watch how he responds. That will reveal more than words." His advice was practical, grounded in the everyday, no grand gestures or divine interventions, just the moral courage to reclaim space, to name the manipulation without apology. He rose then, crossing to a small cabinet beside the desk, and pulled out a plain notebook, its cover worn from use. "And document it," he continued, sliding it toward me across the polished oak, "not for courtrooms or vengeance, but for your own protection. Note the dates of those transfers, the requests that pull at you, the moments like the hotel that cross into disregard. Keep copies of texts, statements, simple records that affirm your reality when doubt creeps in." His tone stayed even, emphasizing truth as a shield, not a weapon. If things escalate, and they might, this gives you allies, a counselor here at church, or a social worker who understands elder dynamics. You're not alone in this. There are quiet ways to safeguard what you've built. No lectures on laws or litigators, just the subtle urging to preserve evidence of my endurance, turning silent suffering into something tangible, defensible. The clock on the wall ticked onward, its rhythm underscoring the intimacy of the moment, and I felt the weight lift slightly, not gone, but redistributed. Father Elias returned to his seat, folding his hands. Remember, compassion doesn't require self-destruction. You can love David, pray for him even, while honoring the woman God made you to be. His choices are his. Yours must reclaim your dignity. His words wove through me, emphasizing the boundary between loyalty and loss, the moral line where family love ended and personal truth began. I thought of the hotel keycard, discarded now in a drawer, and saw it not as defeat, but as a turning point, the first crack in the facade. As we sat there, the afternoon light slanting through the window and gilding the edges of the books, a peace settled, somber yet resolute. Father Elias offered no promises of easy resolution, no miracles to mend the fractures. Instead, he gave me tools, the notebook in my hands, the clarity in his questions, the reminder that dignity was mine to defend. "Go home today," he said softly, "and consider one step. Speak or write or simply breathe in your worth. The rest will unfold as it should." I nodded, clutching the notebook to my chest, the leather warm against my skin. Outside, the leaves still danced in the wind, but now they seemed less like chaos and more like possibility, a quiet justice waiting in the truth I'd begun to claim. The notebook from Father Elias weighed heavier than its pages suggested as I carried it home that evening, tucked under my arm, like a secret too fragile to drop. The drive back to the Colonial was quiet, the wipers sweeping away the last of the drizzle that clung to the windshield, mirroring the haze lifting in my mind. David's SUV was already in the driveway, its hood still warm from whatever errand had pulled him out, and the kitchen light spilled golden onto the porch. A beacon that once felt welcoming, but now seemed conditional. I paused at the door, key in hand, the metal biting into my palm, a reminder of the boundaries we'd just discussed, the ones I'd let blur for too long. Inside, the house hummed with the ordinary, the twins' laughter echoing from the living room, Sarah's voice calling out instructions for bath time, the faint sizzle of something on the stove. David looked up from his laptop at the island, his tie loosened, a half-eaten sandwich beside him. "Hey, Mum. Church stuff run long." His tone was casual, the kind that smoothed over cracks without repairing them. But I saw the flicker in his eyes, the unspoken hope that the hotel incident had faded like morning mist. I set the notebook down on the counter, not hiding it, and met his gaze steadily for the first time in months. The arthritis in my fingers throbbed as I gripped the edge of the granite, but it grounded me, a physical echo of the resolve building inside. "David," I said, my voice even, though it trembled at the edges, "we need to talk about the hotel." He blinked, glancing toward the stairs where Sarah's footsteps padded overhead, then back to me with a sigh that carried the weight of inconvenience. "Mum, that was weeks ago. Everyone's moved on. The in-laws raved about the visit. Why dredge it up?" Because it wasn't just a visit, I thought, but the words Father Elias had urged formed instead, clear and unadorned. It hurt me, David, being sent away like that, to make room for others. I felt disposable, like my place here is only when it suits you. The kitchen fell silent, save for the tick of the wall clock and the distant splash of water from the bathroom. His fork paused midway to his mouth, surprise etching lines across his forehead. For a moment, I braced for dismissal. The eye roll, the "you're overreacting." but he set the utensil down, rubbing his temple as if the words had landed harder than expected. "I didn't mean it that way," he said finally, his voice softening, though it carried that defensive edge I'd come to recognize. "It was practical. The guest room's bigger, quieter for them. Your family, you know we'd never—" He trailed off, searching my face. And in that pause I saw the ledger he kept in his mind. My checks deposited, my hours with the twins, the seamless way I'd filled the gaps. Father Elias's counsel echoed. Name the manipulation, emphasize dignity. And I pressed on, not in anger, but with the quiet clarity he'd modeled. Practical for them, maybe, but for me, it was a door closing on the home I helped build. My contributions aren't just money or time, they're my life here, and if that's conditional, I need to know. Sarah appeared then, drying her hands on a dish towel, the twins' pajamas draped over her arm. She caught the tail end, her brows knitting in that familiar mix of concern and irritation. "Margaret, is this about the hotel again? David's been stressed with work. We were just trying to keep things smooth." Her words were gentle, but they carried the subtext I'd endured for years. My feelings as an added burden, my endurance expected without question. I turned to her, the notebook now open on the counter, its blank pages a canvas for the truth. "It's about more than that, Sarah. It's about feeling valued, not tolerated when convenient." David shifted on the stool, his laptop screen dimming like a fading excuse. "What do you want me to say? Sorry? Fine, I'm sorry. But come on, Mom, you know we need your help around here." Need. The word hung there, exposing the dynamic we'd all ignored, my dependency on their roof, theirs on my quiet support. But in that moment, with Father Elias's notebook staring up at me, something shifted, a small, deliberate turn. I reached for my phone, the one that held the banking app I'd rarely touched, and opened it with fingers that no longer trembled from doubt. "Help is one thing," I said, my voice gaining strength, "but not at the cost of my dignity. Starting this month, my check goes to my own account. I'll still watch the twins when I can, cook if I want, but no more automatic transfers. I won't finance my own displacement anymore." The words landed like a key turning in a new lock, simple yet irrevocable. David's face paled, his mouth opening and closing as the implications sank in. The mortgage payment that would feel the pinch, the budget spreadsheet he'd meticulously balanced with my input. "Mum, you can't. We rely on that. It's for the family." But I held his gaze, the moral code awakening in my chest. A quiet fire Father Elias had fanned with his questions. Family, yes, but not at the expense of self-respect. "Rely on it fairly, then," I replied, hitting the button to update my direct deposit, the confirmation chimes soft in the charged air. "Or find another way. I'm not a line item to be shuffled." Sarah's towel twisted in her hands, her eyes widening as she glanced between us, the evening's routine fracturing under the weight of my stand. The twins called from upstairs, oblivious, their voices a thread pulling at the old patterns, but I didn't move to answer. Instead, I closed the notebook, its cover snapping shut like a boundary drawn. David stood, pacing to the window where the porch light caught the edges of his silhouette, frustration warring with something deeper, guilt, perhaps, or the first crack in his assumptions. "This is because of that pastor, isn't it? Stirring up trouble." But there was no heat in it, only deflection, and I let it pass, the small act complete. One transfer halted, one truth spoken, the humiliation refused. In the hours that followed, the house settled into an uneasy hush. Dinner was eaten in fragments, conversations skirting the edges of what I'd done, the air thick with unspoken questions. I retreated to the guest room, my room, I'd remind myself, with the notebook on the nightstand, its first entry scrawled in careful script, the date, the conversation, the change in the bank settings. It wasn't dramatic, No raised voices or slammed doors, just a quiet reclamation, the turn that reframed my endurance as strength. As I lay in the dark, the ceiling fan whirring softly overhead, I felt the ember of self-respect glow brighter. Father Elias had been right. Boundaries weren't punishment, they were protection, the first step toward a justice born of truth, not surrender. The next morning dawned crisp, the autumn leaves crunching underfoot as I stepped onto the porch with a mug of coffee, the steam curling into the chill. David had left early for the bank, his goodbye curt over his shoulder, but Sarah lingered at the kitchen table, the twins munching cereal while she stared into her own cup. "He didn't sleep well," she said quietly, not accusing but probing. I nodded, sipping the bitter brew, the notebook tucked away, but its presence felt. Neither did I. But it's done. She didn't press, and in that silence, I sensed the shift rippling outward, the small action echoing through the days ahead, awakening not just my moral code, but the possibility of a family redefined, one boundary at a time. The days following that kitchen confrontation stretched like a taut wire, humming with the undercurrent of resentment that had always simmered but now boiled over in subtle, insistent ways. David didn't explode. Not at first. Instead, he withdrew, his presence in the house a shadow that lengthened with each passing evening. He'd come home late from the bank, the front door clicking shut with deliberate care, and retreat to his study, the door ajar just enough for the glow of his laptop to spill into the hallway like an accusation. Sarah, ever the mediator, filled the silences with forced brightness, her smiles tight as she handed me plates for the twins' dinner, her eyes avoiding mine. "Everything's fine, Margaret," she'd say, though the words carried the fragility of cracked porcelain. I nodded, wiping down the counters with methodical strokes, the notebook hidden in my room now filling with entries. Dates of David's curt greetings, Sarah's sidelong glances, the way the household budget app on the fridge calendar now showed red flags where my contributions once buffered the edges. Guilt came first, soft and insidious, wrapped in the familiar cloak of family obligation. It started with a text from David one morning as I sat in the living room, sunlight slanting through the lace curtains and warming the faded armchair that had been my husband's. "Mom, we need to talk. This change is stressing everyone out. The kids notice the tension." Emma asked why Grandma's mad. Mad, the word twisted in my gut, reframing my stand as petulance, not principle. I stared at the screen, the phone heavy in my lap, the twins' toys scattered on the rug like remnants of innocence I'd once guarded. By evening, he was at the kitchen table, his tie undone, eyes earnest in that way they used to be when he was a boy confessing a broken window. "I get it, Mom, you felt hurt. But pulling the checks? That's not fair. We've got bills, the mortgage. You're part of this. Think of the family." His voice cracked on the last word, pulling at the old threads of my endurance, making me question if my small act of reclamation was the fracture, not the hotel exile. I held firm, echoing Father Elias's counsel in my mind, the boundary as protection, not spite. "It's fair to me, David. I gave enough without seeing my worth." But the guilt lingered, a fog that clouded my mornings, amplified by Sarah's quiet sighs as she balanced the checkbook at the island, her pencil scratching out adjustments that once flowed from my account. She didn't accuse outright, but her comments wove through the days like needles. "The grocery budget's tight this week. Maybe we can skip the extras." Extras. The word implied extravagance on my part, though it was the organic milk for the twins or the fresh bread I baked from habit. The twins felt it too, their hugs lingering longer, Jack's small hand tugging at my sleeve with questions. "Why's Daddy quiet?" I soothed them with stories from my Bible, the pages worn from years of quiet reading. But the innocence in their eyes only deepened the ache. turning my resolve into a mirror, reflecting the cost to them. Escalation followed, creeping in like dusk after a long day. David's withdrawals turned to pointed reminders, delivered over breakfast with the precision of his banking spreadsheets. "Remember when you moved in, Mom? We opened our home to you. Now this." It was guilt laced with threat, his tone implying the roof over my head was a privilege, revocable as the hotel keycard. One evening, as rain pattered against the windows and the scent of reheated lasagna filled the air, he escalated further, his voice low but edged with steel. "If you keep this up, we might have to rethink things. The guest room, it's not permanent, you know. We could look into assisted living options, something more suitable." Assisted living, the phrase landed like a cold draft, evoking sterile halls and strangers' faces, stripping away the illusion of belonging I'd clung to. Sarah nodded faintly from the sink, her back turned, complicit in the suggestion that my presence had become a liability, my age a justification for displacement. Public humiliation came next, subtle at first, then spreading like ink in water. David started with the family group chat, the one that included aunts, uncles, and Sarah's relatives, a digital circle I'd rarely contributed to. He posted a vague update. "Tough times at home. Appreciate the support from everyone. Family dynamics can be tricky with elders." Elders. It painted me as the problem, the confused senior disrupting harmony, and the responses trickled in. Thumbs up emojis from Ellen, my sister, with a private message to me. "David says you're being difficult again. Don't make waves, Margaret." Waves. As if my truth were a storm, not a ripple. At church the following Sunday, the whispers amplified. Mrs. Hargrove pulling me aside in the vestibule, her perfume cloying amid the incense. "Heard things are rocky with David. You're not going soft in your old age, are you? Needing more help?" Her words, meant as concern, humiliated in their presumption, turning my private stand into neighborhood law. The ungrateful widow biting the hand that housed her. The smear campaign deepened midweek, when David's frustration boiled into a call to Ellen, loud enough that I overheard from the laundry room, the dryer's hum doing little to muffle his voice. "She's acting irrational, Ellen, like she's forgotten everything we've done. Maybe it's early dementia, the mood swings, the sudden changes." Dementia. The accusation sliced through the air, reframing my clarity as confusion, my boundaries as mental fragility. Ellen arrived the next day, her coat dripping from the drizzle outside, and sat me down in the living room with a cup of tea that steamed accusingly. "David's worried, sis. Pulling money like that. It's not you. Have you seen a doctor? We could get you checked." Her eyes searched mine, pity mingling with doubt, and I felt the isolation close in, the family's narrative overwriting my own. Even the neighbors caught wind. Mr. Patel waved from his driveway, his voice carrying, "Everything okay, Mrs. Harlan? David mentioned you might need some space. Senior moments, eh?" The public unraveling humiliated, each comment a brushstroke in a portrait of me as unstable, alone in my delusions. Intimidation peaked one Friday night, the house dark save for the blue flicker of the television in the den. David cornered me after the twins were asleep, his face shadowed, voice a hushed threat. "If this goes on, Mom, I'll have to involve a lawyer. Protect our assets, you know? And what about you? Ending up alone? No family to lean on. Is that what you want?" The words chilled, evoking eviction notices and empty rooms, the smear of mental health claims now backed by legal shadows. Sarah hovered in the doorway, silent but present, her alliance clear in the way she didn't intervene. I retreated to my room, the door clicking shut, heart pounding against the walls I'd begun to rebuild. The notebook grew thicker that night, pages filled with timestamps of threats, quotes scribbled in haste, a record against the rising tide. Through it all, The quiet endurance I'd known twisted into something sharper, the betrayal etching deeper lines on my face in the mirror each morning. Father Elias's words anchored me during a brief call to his office, his voice steady over the line. "Hold to your truth, Margaret. Their escalation reveals more about them than you." But the weight pressed. The threats and smears a storm battering the fragile structure of my resolve, leaving me to wonder in the small hours if silent justice could withstand the gale. If this story already has your heart, hit the like button. It helps the story of Margaret Harlan reach more people who still believe in humanity. The revelations came not in a thunderclap, but in the quiet unraveling of a drawer left ajar, the kind of oversight that happens when tension frays the edges of routine. It was a Thursday afternoon, the house empty save for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant bark of a neighbor's dog. I'd taken to tidying the study, David's sanctuary of spreadsheets and framed diplomas, more out of habit than invitation, my hands moving through the clutter like a ritual to reclaim some order in the chaos. The desk drawer, half open from his hurried morning departure, revealed a stack of unopened envelopes, their edges crisp and official, stamped with the bank's logo. I paused, the duster in my grip forgotten, a prickle of unease crawling up my spine as I recognized the return addresses. Creditors, loan servicers, the very institutions where David toiled by day. One envelope slipped free as I nudged the drawer shut, its contents spilling onto the carpet like confetti from a broken promise. A statement from a credit line I'd never heard of, balances swollen to 5 figures, interest accruing like weeds in an untended garden. My breath caught, the room tilting slightly as I sank into his chair. The leather still warm from his absence. Dates marched across the page, withdrawals coinciding with family vacations, home renovations, Sarah's new wardrobe for her promotion. And there, buried in the footnotes, the automatic deposits, my social security checks, rerouted not just for household essentials, but funneled into payments on hidden debts they'd accrued, chasing the life of upward mobility. The Colonial's mortgage I'd known about, but this, gambling debts from David's stress relief poker nights with colleagues, Sarah's impulsive online shopping binges, Master's investments in the family image. It reframed everything. The hotel exile not a mere convenience for in-laws, but a calculated move to present a facade of stability, my displacement ensuring no prying eyes on the fraying finances. I sat there, the paper trembling in my arthritic fingers, the late afternoon light filtering through the blinds in slats that striped the floor like bars. How long had this been brewing? The pieces clicked into place with a somber inevitability. The offhand comments about tight months, the way David scrutinized my pension statements during dinners, his eyes lingering not on gratitude, but on the numbers. I'd been the buffer, the silent utility propping up their illusions. My endurance not valued for its own sake, but as a lifeline to conceal the cracks. The in-laws visit? A performance to secure a loan from Sarah's father. Whispers I'd overheard about impressing the family, now taking on a sharper edge. They'd sent me away to stage the perfect home, free of any hint of strain, my contributions the invisible glue holding the debt at bay. The front door creaked open downstairs, Sarah's voice calling out to the twins as she juggled grocery bags, her heels clicking on the tile. I folded the statement hastily, slipping it back, but the knowledge burned, a quiet fire in my chest that demanded air. She found me in the study moments later, her arms laden with produce, a forced smile faltering as she took in my expression. "Margaret, you look like you've seen a ghost. Everything all right?" Her tone was light, but her eyes darted to the desk, a flicker of wariness betraying the composure. I stood, steadying myself against the chair, the weight of the truth pressing down like the arthritis in my joints on a damp day. "Sarah, I saw the statements. The debts. How long have you been using my money to hide them? The words emerged calm, restrained, echoing Father Elias's counsel to name the manipulation without fury. She froze, bags rustling to the floor, an apple rolling across the rug to stop at my feet. Colour drained from her face, and for a moment the mediator's mask slipped, revealing the complicity I'd never suspected. Not just David, but her, the good daughter-in-law, the one who'd cooed over my help with the twins, all while tallying my worth in dollars and hours. "It's not like that," she stammered, kneeling to gather the spilled groceries, her voice a whisper laced with defense. "We were going to tell you, eventually. David's promotions fell through, the market dipped. Your checks kept us afloat. It was temporary, for the family." Temporary. The word echoed hollow, reframing her kindnesses as transactions, the thank yous after childcare shifts, the invitations to family outings that always circled back to my contributions. She'd been the architect, I realized, the one suggesting I deposit directly into their account years ago, her accountant's precision turning my pension into their safety net. The hotel. Her idea, murmured in a phone call I'd overheard fragments of, to keep things looking solid for her parents, who held the purse strings to potential bailouts. Complicit, not coerced, her ambition intertwined with his, my utility the thread binding their facade. David arrived home to the charged silence, the air thick as the stew simmering on the stove. Sarah met him in the hallway, their hushed argument filtering through the walls like muffled confessions, accusations of carelessness, pleas for unity against the old woman's prying. He burst into the study, face flushed, the man who'd once been my boy, now a stranger armored in justification. "You went through my things?" "Mom, that's an invasion. Those are private." But his eyes held fear. Not anger, the deeper truth exposed. They'd valued me not as mother or grandmother, but as a resource. My presence tolerated only so long as it served their hidden struggles. The inheritance I'd tucked away, a modest life insurance payout from my husband, untouched in a separate account. They'd eyed it too. Casual probes about estate planning now revealed as probes for control. I faced them both, the trio of us framed in the doorway like a faded portrait. The twins' laughter from the kitchen a poignant counterpoint. "I wasn't prying," I said softly, my voice steady in the intimate dimness of the room. "I was cleaning up the mess you've made of us all. My money, my time. It wasn't a gift to fund your secrets. It was trust, given freely, and you've turned it into chains." David's shoulders slumped, the fight draining as realization dawned. But Sarah's gaze hardened, her complicity laid bare in the way she stepped behind him, alliance clear. In that moment, the reframing settled deep. I had been the pillar, enduring silently for a family that saw me as expendable once the utility waned, my dignity collateral in their game of appearances. Father Elias's office felt like a refuge the next morning. The scent of rain-damp earth seeping through the cracked window as I recounted it all, the notebook open on my lap like an open wound. He listened without interruption, his nod subtle, the clock's tick marking the gravity. "This truth redefines the betrayal, doesn't it?" he said at last, his words a quiet anchor. "Not just neglect, but a calculated use of your goodness. Yet in seeing it, you reclaim the power they thought to steal." The deeper motive, the hidden debts, Sarah's willing hand, hung between us, reframing my endurance not as weakness, but as the quiet strength that had sustained them, now turning inward for my own salvation. Outside, the wind whispered through the churchyard, carrying away the illusions, leaving only the somber clarity of what family truly meant when stripped to its core. The weeks after that study confrontation unfolded like a slow thaw, the house's warmth giving way to a chill that no furnace could dispel. David and Sarah's arguments filtered through the walls at night, muffled voices rising and falling like distant thunder, the twins' questions about why everyone's sad hanging unanswered in the air. I kept to my room more, the notebook now a constant companion on the nightstand, its pages dense with details. The debt statements photocopied in secret at the library, timestamps of their escalating threats, even Sarah's emails to her parents, forwarded carelessly to the family chat, begging for a short-term loan while painting our home as stable and thriving. The lies exposed themselves in fragments, not a grand unveiling, but a steady drip that eroded their facade. Father Elias had been right. Documentation wasn't vengeance, it was visibility, turning my whispered endurance into a record that spoke louder than shouts. I started with allies, quiet ones who wouldn't amplify the drama, but could steady the ground beneath me. Ellen, my sister, arrived unannounced one grey afternoon, her coat buttoned tight against the wind that rattled the porch chimes. She'd seen the group chat posts, David's vague pleas for family support, and Sarah's polished updates, omitting the strain. We sat at the kitchen table, steam rising from mugs of instant coffee that tasted bitter on my tongue, the twins napping upstairs under Sarah's watchful eye. "He called me again," Ellen said, her voice low, stirring her cup with unnecessary vigor. "Says you're unstable, pulling money to spite them. But I saw the bank alerts you forwarded. Those debts aren't new, Margaret. They've been digging this hole for years, using you as the shovel." Her eyes, sharp despite the lines of age, met mine without pity, only the pragmatic clarity of someone who'd watched our family cycles before. No sermons, just facts. She'd reviewed the statements I'd shared, cross-referenced with her own modest savings logs. "You're not the villain here. Call the Elder Services line at the church. They handle this without courts." That call came the next day from the landline in the hallway, its coiled cord twisting like the knots in my stomach. The voice on the other end, a social worker named Clara, with a calm Midwestern lilt, listened as I recounted the hotel stay, the financial rerouting, the threats of assisted living as punishment. No judgments, just questions that mirrored Father Elias's. "Do you have records? Safe places to go if needed?" I read from the notebook, dates and quotes flowing out in a voice steadier than I felt, the receiver warm against my ear. She suggested a meeting, neutral ground at the community centre, and connected me to a free financial advisor through the parish network. Realistic steps, not miracles, that affirmed my right to my own pension without isolation. "You're protecting yourself," Clara said softly. "And that's justice enough for now." The exposure was subtle. No public shaming, but a paper trail forwarded to her office. Copies tucked away for any escalation. David sensed the shift, his retaliations sharpening into cornered desperation. One evening, as dusk painted the windows in bruised purples, he slammed a folder onto the kitchen island, lawyer letterhead glaring under the pendant light. "This is it, Mom. We've consulted someone. If you don't resume the transfers, we'll claim undue influence or something. Protect what's ours." His hands trembled, the banker facade cracking, revealing the fear beneath the intimidation. Sarah hovered by the fridge, arms crossed, her earlier complicity now a shield of silence. But I'd prepared. The notebook open beside my untouched tea, pages marked with the debt proofs and the social worker's notes. "Undue influence," I replied, my tone even, the arthritis in my fingers a dull ache as I slid a copy of the statements toward him. "Like how you've influenced my checks into your debts, or lied to Ellen and the family about my instability to cover it." The words hung in the air, intimate and unyielding, exposing the smears without spectacle, the dementia whispers, the elder problems narrative crumbling under the weight of evidence. He scanned the pages, color draining from his face, the folder forgotten as realization settled. "Where did you... This is private!" But it wasn't, not anymore. The decisive boundary I'd drawn with Father Elias's guidance now extended, a line not of anger, but of truth. I leaned forward, the wooden chair creaking under me, and met his eyes, the same ones that had sparkled with boyish trust years ago. Private, like sending me to a hotel to hide your mess from the in-laws? No, David, this ends the utility. My money stays mine, and if you push, Clara's ready with the reports for elder financial abuse, not spite. The term learned from her call landed softly but firmly, reframing their threats as the real violation. Sarah gasped, stepping back, her alliance fracturing in the face of documentation that named her role, the emails plotting my contributions as debt service, her suggestions to keep Mom contributing quietly. Consequences followed, real and measured, without the flash of fantasy. David withdrew the lawyer talk that night, his study door shut tight, the house falling into a hush broken only by the twins' bedtime songs. Ellen stepped in more, driving me to the bank to secure my accounts fully, her presence a quiet ally that deterred further smears. The family chat went silent, the lies exposed in private calls where aunts and uncles heard my side. Not rants, but facts from the notebook, shared over tea in Ellen's apartment. Sarah's parents, informed by Clara's neutral outreach, withheld the loan they'd dangled, their disappointment in the facade, forcing David to confront the creditors himself. Late payments restructured, poker nights confessed in hushed bank meetings. No ruin, but a humbling, promotions delayed, budgets slashed, the colonials Polish fading as they learned to live without my invisible prop. Father Elias met me again midweek, the office dim with the scent of beeswax candles from the sanctuary. I handed him the updated notebook, its weight lighter now, and he flipped through silently, his nod affirming the path. "Justice here isn't punishment," he said, closing it with a soft thud, "but restoration, your dignity reclaimed through truth, their choices meeting their echoes. No absolution for them, just calm clarity for me. The boundaries held, allies fortified, lies laid bare in ways that fit the quiet rhythm of life. Outside the wind hushed, leaves settling on the path, and I felt the somber peace of it, not victory, but equilibrium. The silent endurance transformed into a self-respect that no debt could claim. The months slipped by like pages in a well-worn book, each one turning with a deliberate slowness that allowed the dust to settle on the fractures we'd exposed. The colonial house, once a symbol of shared burdens and unspoken trades, now felt like a shared space rather than a stage for illusions. Its rooms quieter, the air less charged with the weight of hidden ledgers. I moved through my days with a rhythm reborn, the arthritis in my hands, a constant companion but no longer a chain. Mornings began with coffee on the porch, the steam mingling with the crisp bite of winter air, watching the neighborhood stir. Mr. Patel tending his garden beds, the school bus rumbling down the street, collecting children whose laughter pierced the frost. The notebook from Father Elias rested on the shelf now, its entries a testament etched in ink, rarely opened but always there, a quiet guardian of the truth I'd claimed. David and Sarah adapted in fits and starts, their escalations giving way to a tentative recalibration. The debts loomed, but without my pension as a crutch, they faced them head-on. Budget meetings at the kitchen table where voices rose and fell, not in blame toward me, but in the raw negotiation of their choices. David took a second job weekends at the bank, his suits rumpled from longer hours, and Sarah scaled back her wardrobe splurges, her accountant's precision turned inward to salvage what they'd built on sand. The twins, bless their innocent hearts, bridged the gaps with hugs that wrapped around my waist, their small hands pulling me into games of tag in the backyard, where the leaves had long since fallen and given way to bare earth promising renewal. "Grandma stays," Emma declared one afternoon, her pigtails bouncing as she planted a flag of twigs in the dirt, and in that childlike certainty I saw glimmers of redemption, not flawless but real, forged in the fire of consequence. Yet the haunting lingered, a shadow that softened the edges of peace but never fully dissipated. Nights found me in the guest room, my room, claimed without apology, staring at the ceiling where moonlight filtered through the curtains in silver threads. The hotel's metallic click echoed in my mind, not as defeat, but as the pivot point, where silent endurance cracked open to reveal the cost of unexamined loyalty. Dignity, Father Elias had said, was inherent, a quiet flame that manipulation sought to dim but could never extinguish. I'd felt its absence keenly in those early days, the humiliation of the keycard and the pitying glances, the betrayal of a son who'd traded my place for appearances. But in reclaiming it, through boundaries drawn in calm words, through allies who listened without judgment, I rediscovered a faith in humanity's quieter virtues, the compassion that endures without self-erasure, the justice that whispers rather than roars. Family, too, reshaped itself in the aftermath, its meaning stripped of the masks we'd all worn. No longer the ledger of contributions and comforts, it emerged as something fragile, yet resilient, a web of choices where love demanded reciprocity, not blind sacrifice. David and I spoke more now, not in grand reconciliations, but in fragments over breakfast. His apologies murmured into his coffee mug, my responses measured, forgiving without forgetting. "I saw you as a fix, Mom," he admitted one evening, the twins asleep and the house wrapped in twilight hush, "not as you." Sarah, slower to bend, offered gestures, a shared recipe from her mother's book, a walk with the children where her steps matched mine without hurry. The complicity I'd uncovered in her didn't vanish, but it softened under the weight of exposure, her hidden role in the debts forcing a mirror she couldn't avoid. Ellen visited weekly, her practical counsel a steadying force, reminding me that blood ties were threads, not chains, woven stronger when truth bound them. Father Elias remained the grounded guide through it all, his office a touchstone I returned to sporadically, the scent of polished wood and faint incense, welcoming as an old friend. Our last meeting came on a spring morning, the churchyard blooming with crocuses that pushed through the soil like stubborn hopes. I sat across from him, the chair familiar now, its leather molded to my form, and shared the incremental healings, the pension secure in my own account, funding a small apartment nearby that David helped me find, not out of obligation, but choice. "It's not separation," I told him, my voice steady, "but space to breathe as equals." He smiled faintly, his eyes crinkling behind the glasses, and leaned forward. "Redemption isn't erasure of the pain, Margaret. It's the choice to carry it lightly, letting it teach without define. You've honored your dignity, and in that, faith in humanity renews itself." He was right. The betrayal's echo faded, replaced by a haunting reflection on what we'd all lost and found. The manipulation, disguised as familial love, had eroded trust like water on stone, but the quiet justice of truth restored a foundation, however cracked. I thought of the in-laws' visit, now a distant memory they'd never repeat, their loan withheld, forcing David to confront the utility he'd placed on me. No revenge, just consequences that rippled outward, teaching the twins early about fairness, about seeing the elders not as burdens, but as bearers of wisdom. Faith in humanity flickered in those small moments. Clara's follow-up calls from elder services, ensuring my security without fanfare, the neighbors' nods turning from pity to respect as whispers of the truth circulated not as scandal, but as a cautionary grace. In the end, as I settled into the apartment, a cozy one-bedroom with windows overlooking a park where birds called at dawn, the reflection settled deep, calm and unyielding. Dignity wasn't reclaimed in triumph, but in the daily choice to stand unbowed, to extend compassion without destruction. Family meant not the illusion of unbreakable bonds, but the courage to redefine them through honesty. where neglect silence gave way to voices heard. The hotel keycard, long discarded, served as a symbol now, a door closed on humiliation, opening to a life of quiet self-respect. And in that, a redemption not for them alone, but for the woman I'd almost lost, the one who endured, then rose, faith intact in the humanity that, despite its shadows, still held light enough to guide. Subscribe for more stories of compassion, justice, and redemption. Thank you for watching the case of Margaret Harlan. See you in the next one.